Every time OpenAI drops a new model, it is a big deal. Not a little feature or anything like that. This is a brand new model. We have GPT 4.5. So, what is it? Is it any good? We have, it's not one of these things where we want to start with like, this is blowing everybody out of the water, because there's some mixed feelings on it, especially around the cost of it. But that being said, listen, this is 4.5. I'm seeing some actually really cool things about it. Jaden, I know you were reading a lot about it. Obviously, like we were on the phone this morning or over on text this morning. We are like, holy cow, right? This is obviously topic number one. So talk to me. What are you seeing about all this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the sentiment and essentially what everyone's saying is this is an impressive it's an impressive model, but maybe not always for the right reasons. I want to actually read Sam Altman's tweet on it. I think that breaks down a lot of the basics of what it can do. But I guess before that, you mentioned the cost, and the cost increase is significant. Now, I think there's some interesting things that they're doing as far like strategy wise, as far as why they're rolling this out right now and kind of what the future plans are. And they've sort of outlined some of this. Sam Altman talking about what they plan on doing with, for example, GPT-5. And I think this is beyond just being like this is like the new AI model everyone's going to use. This almost feels
Right.
like a stepping stone, if I'm being
Right.
100% honest. So that's kind of the vibe I'm getting. All right, I'll read you guys the tweet that Sam Altman put out. He said, GPT 4.5 is ready. Good news. It's the first model that feels like talking to a thoughtful person to me. I've had several moments where I've sat back in my chair and been astonished at getting actually good advice from AI. The bad news, it is a giant expensive model. We really wanted to launch it to Plus and Pro at the same time. We've been growing a lot and we're out of GPUs. We will add tens of thousands of GPUs next week and roll it out to Plus tier then. Hundreds of thousands coming soon. And I'm pretty sure y'all will use every one we can rack up. This isn't how we want to operate, but it's hard to be perfect or to perfectly predict growth surges that lead to GPU shortages. A heads up, this isn't a reasoning model and it won't crush benchmarks. It's a different kind of intelligence. There's a magic to it that I haven't felt before. Really excited for people to try it out. All right, Connor, this some people call this a spin, some people call this a new type of intelligence. What's your take on what's going on here?
Yeah, it's funny, right? It's I think you're right to say it's a stepping stone, but you have to put this in the context of who's saying it. When Sam Altman is saying, it's pretty good," I mean, like these are people that are trying to raise money and should usually be. By the way, I think it's Jaden. Correct me if I'm wrong. I was just thinking about this now. It feels like the first model that has ever come out, and I mean from anyone, that didn't flash up where it was on the benchmark, right? I mean, like
Yep.
Google, DeepSeek, Grok, Claude. Everybody always shows like, and we've beat everybody on this mixture of expert, whatever it is, whatever benchmark they
Hmm.
or the Limsys, whatever. This is the first time it hasn't done that, and he kind of goes straight to that, which is interesting right away. Now, having said that, benchmarks I think tend to be wildly overrated. I mean, like these tools are beating each other by a few percentage points in uh, theoretical physics and things like that. It's not something that you and I talk about all the time, which is it's not something that is going to actually help how people actually use these tools or anything like that. So it's not
Hmm.
actually that interesting when they beat. It's good to know that yes, Grok 3 is on par with this, or DeepSeek is on par with this. So I guess I would say, first of all, I don't want to say I'm disappointed or not disappointed, because I'm not sure even what I expected out of this. Like the fact that there is a 4.5 is very confusing to me. The thing that I will say that I really liked and that I was posting about is the empathetic part. And the reason that
Hmm.
I get very excited about that is because to me, that's I don't want to say that's everything, but that's a lot. Like the reason why Microsoft brought Mustafa Suleiman over from Inflection to run their whole AI is, first of all, he's a genius and they know how to do AI and all that sort of stuff. But Inflection had had a vibe to it, right? It was
Hmm.
extremely empathetic, all that sort of stuff. Inflection was supposed to be almost like your therapist or your friend or something, and that is not something to underestimate. I mean, when you think about how people are actually using AI, it tends to not be in the can this thing do a physics problem? It tends to be, hey, I want to talk to this and have a conversation with it, right? And so when
Hmm.
you're thinking about how many millions and millions of people are using, for example, character AI and things like that, these are the actual applications and implications of AI. So the thing that I was writing about when I first saw 4.5, and I haven't tried it, but I watched a lot of demos on it, is it felt kind of like more like Claude. And I love Claude because I cannot get ChatGPT to imitate my voice very well. ChatGPT is my go-to. I love it, but I cannot. That's why I don't write with it almost ever. I only write with Claude because Claude totally gets voice. It totally gets tone. It gets that so well. So if ChatGPT can start nailing that, I don't know. That might be worth it. Too expensive, but it might be worth the leap.
Yeah, I think that you might be right there. I kind of have a theory on what is really going on here, but before I outline my
I can't wait.
theory that I know you will just love, I want to just cover the cost. So it's very expensive. So expensive that right now OpenAI is evaluating whether they want to continue serving GPT 4.5 on their API in the long term. Okay, that's kind of the worst thing ever to say to a developer. Like myself, I'm integrating a bunch of AI models into a product. Which, drum roll please, we are launching our first version of the AI Box Playground on March 10th. So really excited for
Woo!
the big launch. It's been like 2 years in the making, and Connor's sick of me talking about it. So
No,
just
I
let me get
love it.
my
I'm
hands on it by
excited,
now.
man.
Um, but when you tell a developer, like, hey, we have an API for this thing, we don't really know if we want to support it in the long run because of X, Y, and Z reasons. It's like, okay, well, why would I even add that? Why would I even try using it? So I think that's kind of like a fumble. But in order to access it, OpenAI is charging developers $75 for every million input tokens. That's about 750,000 words. And $150 for every million output tokens. So let's do a comparison. GPT-4o, fantastic model, does great. It costs $2.50 per million input and $10 per million output tokens. This is insane, going from $10 to $150. Why would I ever incorporate this into a product? Well, because it's so much better, you might say. Okay, so we look at the benchmarks, and GPT-4o beats on a whole bunch of benchmarks that GPT 4.5 cannot beat on. Now, not all of them. GPT 4.5 is a little bit better at some things, but then you get to like the actual user testing. And the thing that really kind of blew me away, I retweeted this over on Twitter, is that Karpathy, he did some community testing and found that 80% of people preferred the answers of
Oh
GPT
wow.
4.0 instead of GPT 4.5. He did kind of like a blind test on the two models. So this isn't for every question, but for a lot of things that people were using, they literally preferred the other model. So why would I increase my cost more than like 15x? $10,
Right.
150, 15x my cost for a model that isn't even necessarily any better. It's so that I think is the fumble. Now, you mentioned the tone is good. There are some good things about it. I retweeted one other thing. I'm trying to be a little balanced here in my rage, right? It's someone said GPT 4.5 is naturally funny. It doesn't feel forced or slop. Okay, maybe this is true. They said draw me an SVG of a car. They drew an SVG of a car, which is like actually really impressive that it can do that. And I hope you could kind of modify it by chatting with it. But after it drew the SVG of the car, it said, this SVG car won't start without SVG gasoline, by the way. Good luck finding that. That's kind of funny, right? So it's like,
Right.
it seems like they're kind of adding the personality. They're doing the inflection, the Claude, but it's like, do you really need to go 15x on the cost to add a personality? Now, like we mentioned, and I'll kick this over to you, Connor, this feels like a stepping stone into GPT-5. It seems like they got to get this thing out. This isn't a reasoning model, meaning like reasoning model isn't anything magical or special. I mean, a little bit, but it is pretty much software on top that runs the AI model over and over again and helps it reason. And it has a bunch of like software essentially in there that helps it do the reasoning part. So like this thing can get a lot better. And right now it's not able to beat the 4.0 model, but maybe with reasoning it will be able to. I don't know, whatever. So like hopefully this thing's gonna get a lot better with GPT-5, and maybe they're just preparing a big wow. Maybe they're like close on GPT-5 and they're like, hey, we'll just send this out to, kind of appease people for a minute while we work on the big thing. That's like my vibe I get on it. But yeah, definitely not something I would switch over to or incorporate into any software I'm using, just because the cost is so high and it doesn't seem like the payoff is that great right now.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, it's one of these things where when we are having the debate, which is still ongoing with all of us, which is GPT Pro, is it worth $200 a month? And the answer is, for some people, yeah, it's funny, like something like that is either incredibly cheap or incredibly expensive. So if you are if GPT Pro for $200 a month, and it's amazing reasoning models, all that sort of stuff is allowing you to do really high value work, uh, then it's a steal. It's an absolute steal at $200 a month. However, if it's somebody like me and I don't have it because I can't find enough good use cases for it. I mean, I'd like to mess around with some of the things that it has access to, operator and things like that, but it's not practical for me at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't use it yet. I may make that switch at some point, but then it's incredibly expensive. So it's all relative, right? So something that has a better, an empathetic feel and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I can find use cases for it. Like if you're a doctor or something like that, or somebody who really values how you interact in bedside manner and all that sort of stuff, then yes, I can see that. But that's me stretching here. Do you know what I mean? Like that's a
Mm-hmm.
reach. And then the idea, Jaeden, as you said, that's 15x the cost is absurd. So am I happy about it? Yeah, I'm thrilled about it because it shows that ChatGPT can actually become a little more human sounding, and I think that's critical. But I'll
Totally.
just end with this, which is the fact that, because I know we're kind of like running up against time, and we don't want to sort of spend tons of time on GPT 4.5 if we're not all going to, it's not going to change our lives here. But what I do think, Jaeden, and I'll hand it over to you for a last thought here. I do think that it's getting closer to Claude. I do think that this is an indication of what's to come. But this to me is it's cool, it's interesting, it's fun to sort of see it, all that sort of stuff. It's great when they release a new model. I always think that's a big deal. But to me, it didn't change my world at all.
Yeah, and I think some people probably are going a little overboard. They're saying, judging by the mood, GPT 4.5 is the first big failure of OpenAI, too expensive, too little improvement, and often inferior to GPT 4.0, even in comparison in creative answers and community tests. This comes as a big surprise. This is from Chubby, one of my favorite Twitter accounts. You might, I don't know if you follow or not, but
Mm-mm.
shout out to Chubby. Um, I love anonymous Twitter accounts. It just really brings me joy. I send screenshots of to all my brothers in my brother group chat of I can't even remember. Anyways, just like the most unhinged usernames, but they have like really in-depth insider information on an economic
Yeah,
indicator.
it's bizarre.
It's
Yeah.
so funny. So anyways, I think that yeah, at the end of the day, people are roasting it, and I know it sounds kind of harsh. I do feel like, given everything considered, I actually am kind of in the same camp. It seems like a big, like maybe it's a necessary evil. Maybe it has to happen in order for them to get to GPT-5, but it doesn't feel good. It's not something I'm used. It's not something I'd go pay the $200 to get access to today. So I think in that regard, it didn't really wow and anything. But that being said, this isn't like some big dig at OpenAI, because I still love a lot of their models. I'm not going to lie. I actually have replaced most of my ChatGPT usage with Grok usage.
Oh wow.
Shocker. Literally a shocker to me. I have the Grok app on my phone, and I prefer the responses. And now that it has voice like talking mode on it, it's like kind
Wow.
of kind of cool. So in any case, that's my biggest surprise of the week. But I still do like OpenAI. They got a lot of cool features and tools, and it's kind of the OG. And Grok just came out with their newest thing that beat them on a bunch of benchmarks, so I'm liking the responses better. But OpenAI, well, actually, I guess this is OpenAI's big response to that. So hopefully GPT-5 blows me out of the water and wins me back on my daily usage. I don't actually switch from tool to tool very frequently. I never made a switch to Claude. I never fully got into Perplexity. ChatGPT was my biggest anchor, and now it feels like it's moved to Grok, because they did beat on like by a big margin on a bunch of benchmarks, and I like the responses. But we'll see how that plays out. I'm not I'm not specifically loyal to any brand. I'll use whatever I think gives me the best responses. Anyways, fascinating. We'll keep you up to date on everything happening with OpenAI in the future. As always, thank you so much for tuning into the podcast. The number one thing you could do if you learned anything from this and you wanted to say thank you is to leave us a review on the show. We read all the reviews. We really appreciate them. And there's a link in the description to Conor's AI course, AI mindset course you absolutely have to take if you have not already. It will completely change how you use AI. And especially with a lot of these new models coming out, it's going to help you think about how to think about these AI models, the frameworks you need, all of that. Absolutely incredible. So the link's in the description. Thanks so much for tuning in. We will catch you all next time.